brainstorm.
Today's episode of Killer Means Awesome is brought to you by Jade Petrochemicals. With offices in Long Beach and Bahrain, Jade Petrochemicals sets the global standard for safe storage and shipping of vital petrochemicals. That sounds like a wild party that's going on there.
Yeah.
You know, like the glass is breaking, and it sounds like a good party.
It's experimenting. Yeah, there's a lot of inventing going on in the background.
Dr. Geller, welcome back. It's episode 2 of
Yes.
Killer Means Awesome Season 3.
Correct. Very exciting. Again, the new Halo brand, Killer Means Awesome, this season featuring killer inventions. Super excited for episode 2.
Yeah, couldn't be more excited. Can you bring us up to date on some of the far-flung places people are listening to us from?
Absolutely. So we're going to check in, say hello to a few of the places where people were listening from in the last episode. And
Yeah.
so to start, let's say hello to our friends in Warner Robins, Georgia. Warner Robins. Yeah.
They got some great place names down there. Before it was like Peachtree Corner.
Yes.
And now we got Warner Robins. We do well in Georgia, it sounds like.
Yeah, both with Peachtree Corners and now Warner Robins. We seem to be taking over Georgia.
And Canada. We always do well in Canada and Georgia.
Perfect lead in to our next hello, which goes out to Edmonton, Alberta.
Oh,
listeners in Edmonton, the Oilers.
Way up there. Go Oilers. Except don't.
Exciting.
Yeah, what is it? Like neither one of us is Canadian. Why do we do so well up there?
You know, it might be proximity. Like they just kind of hear us over the border, and so they check us out.
I mean, you're from Chicago.
Sure.
That's like almost
Correct.
Canada.
Not really.
Across the lake, right?
Well, technically, you cross the lake, then you're in the UP, and then you can continue on to Canada. Yeah.
I'm thinking of Detroit. Yeah,
Detroit's
you're not
pretty
from
close.
Detroit. Yeah.
I'm not. But let's also say hello to our friends in Spring City, Pennsylvania. So we got Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Alberta this week.
I wonder where in the Keystone State. What's
Spring City.
Again? Spring City. I wonder where that is.
I don't know. It sounds nice. It sounds lively.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom, first few years of her life, she was in Wilkes-Barre.
Oh, where's that?
Pennsylvania. I don't know. It's like
I mean, but is that
Western? I think it's Western PA. Yeah. Well, I say that, but I think it's near Scranton, so I should know this. I don't know.
Yeah. No, were you able to look at the inbox? Any excitement over the first episode?
Excitement. Yeah. Mark M. from Newton, Mass. asked if there were more books that we could recommend on the topic of psychedelics.
Interesting. He wants to read rather than experiment.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to encourage people to use these substances necessarily unless they're over 18 and in a locality where they're at least decriminalized. That being said, there's a good one by a guy named James Fadiman, Fadiman, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you the basics on the topic.
Is he pro? Is he a pro psychedelics?
He's both a professional and he's in favor of. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. That sounds good.
He's experienced.
Yeah.
There's one also called Acid Dreams, which is good. It kind of gives like the history of LSD and the history of LSD in relation to American political history, American cultural history.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good one. And then the other one that I think I mentioned in the last episode was the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind.
Yes.
So, I mean,
Yes.
maybe start with those three. And then, of course, the other one also mentioned in the podcast was the one Albert Hoffman himself wrote about LSD,
Nice.
My Problem Child. So, Mark M. in Newton, thanks for listening. And maybe start with those four. I didn't, in the last episode, I was like, oh, and look, Bill Gates did LSD. And oh, look, Steve Jobs did LSD. I didn't mention and so did Charles Manson. and
Ooh.
so did, Lee Harvey Oswald. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It could
Got
go
to
either
balance
way.
it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the other email we got was from Charlotte in England. That
Is this
generally
botany
is
related? We didn't
not,
mention Queen Anne's
it's
lace or
not always a
anything like
great
that.
sign.
Yeah.
We love what an avid, close listener she is. She said that she pointed out an error in last episode.
Really?
She said that Cary Grant's wife was indeed on the Andrea Doria,
Yes.
and the actress Ruth Roman was on the Andrea Doria ship, which we covered in season 1 of Killer Shipwrecks.
Shipwrecks, yeah, that was a great shipwreck. Yeah.
But those are not the same person.
Oh.
Ruth
really?
Roman and it's obvious now saying it, but in our episode, I think you made the great callback. You were like, "Wait, dude, wasn't Cary Grant's wife? Wasn't she on the ship?" And I was like, "Yeah, Ruth Roman." But those are two different people.
Oh, I see.
But they were both on the ship.
Both on the ship, so no harm, no foul.
No harm, no foul. Unclear.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte's amazing that way. She sometimes I feel like she's trying out for Lizzie's job. Like she's trying to, you know what I mean? Like she's got that sort of like, excellent work, boys, but there was this mistake, and also your tone in relation to this subject. She's got a little bit of that school marm.
Right, but maybe she could be a fact checker. I mean, it sounds like maybe if she were to screen our episodes in advance of release, we could be well covered. Any other housekeeping items before we jump in?
Some people saying great job, but those were the two that felt like they needed to be addressed. Let's jump in.
Yeah. Season 3, episode 2. Now, last week, you kicked off the season with the story of the invention of LSD, which centered on the chemist, Albert Hofmann. Is that right? That's my recollection.
Is true. That's my recollection as well. So we might both be wrong, but at least we're wrong together.
Excellent. So now, given that, there is going to be some continuity for this episode because, believe it or not, we're still in the world of chemistry.
No.
So, but maybe this should have been Killer Chemistry. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe that's next season, Killer Chemistry.
Not a bad idea, although we will have already used up 2 great stories. In any case, let's get going. This person's name that we're going to be discussing today, the inventor's name, is Sir William Henry Perkin. William Henry Perkin.
No S on the end of that thing?
I triple checked that because I kept saying his name as Henry Perkins, but it's Perkin.
Perkin. Weird.
Okay, so Sir William Henry Perkin was born in March of 1838 in London, England. So again, episode 2, we have another European chemist.
Keep going. You have my attention.
Great. So 1838, William Henry Perkin is born, and we're going to quickly skip ahead 18 years to 1856. Okay, so we're just cutting to the point where William Henry Perkin is 18 years old, and the year is 1856. Now, 1856, incidentally, was a leap year, and I know we track those things. I know we track those things, but what's interesting is guess who invented leap years? This is like an episode within an episode. Yeah,
exactly.
We're like a Chinese, we're that Russian nesting doll of inventions. But
what?
Who invented leap years?
Well, is it that they invented them, or they just
kind of they came up with them? They just said like, hey, you know what? We're going to shorten up the year, or we're going to do leap years.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer.
I'm going to tell you then. It is Roman Emperor Julius Caesar.
No,
he's back. He is back, and he created leap years. So that has nothing to do with the episode, but I thought it was a funny little connection to various episodes we've done.
Yeah.
And Julius Caesar. Not sure what Cleopatra thought about the leap year idea, but he introduced it. So it goes back a long ways.
I should have known that. I'm the supposed resident ancient Greece, ancient Rome expert. Yeah.
Okay, so now Perkin is 18 years old. He is a student at the time at London's Royal College of Chemistry.
Cool.
So he's studying chemistry. He has not become a chemist, right? He's only 18 in school. During his spring break, so they called it Easter break, his instructor, August Wilhelm von Hofmann, again, funny coincidence, his last name is Hofmann, another chemist, yes.
Okay.
His instructor told his students, over the break, he'd like them to work on a project in their home labs and see if they could figure out a way to produce quinine. Run experiments and see if you could maybe come up with a cheap way to produce quinine. Now, quinine has also come up in other episodes.
Yes. That was a shipwreck where they were bringing back whatever the plant was from the New World that you could get quinine from.
That's exactly right. And so the quinine obviously used to treat malaria. But as you referenced, at the time, it had to be extracted from the bark of these exotic trees. And it was very expensive to produce.
And so he wasn't suggesting for spring break they fly to South America.
No, it's sort of like the opposite of Daytona Beach. Stay home in your lab and come up with a way to create quinine. Okay, so, and again, so times have changed, right? Now, spring break, you think the beach, you think skiing. Back then, it was go home and develop an anti-malaria drug. So everyone, did their own thing.
Yeah, that's a more productive use of spring break.
Yeah, although I kind of remember once on spring break playing with baking soda and water and creating flubber. You know that material, like when you squeeze it, it's a hard substance, and then when you release it, it turns into a liquid. The flubber.
Yeah, and I remember one where one of the kids had to do like a science experiment for school. And we did the thing where you drop like the Mentos into the huge bottle of Coke and the thing explodes or whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's an evergreen. That one is always a good. That'll be good 50 years from now. That'll be a good school science project.
Absolutely. Unclear if that has any impact on malaria, but definitely a distraction, right? So like if you're suffering from malaria, that would be a fun little burst of energy to see that the geyser of Diet Coke.
It's a geyser. Great word. That's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's get back to this anti-malaria drug. So you might be thinking, oh, how cool. He wanted his kids to contribute something to the world, eradicate malaria. But that wasn't the reason. The reason was because of Europe's colonial grip potentially slipping because of malaria. So it wasn't necessarily an altruistic pursuit. It was more about like, geez, we're taking over all these lands and all our people are getting sick. So we need quinine so we can keep, plundering.
Wow. So you just flipped it on its head there. It became a tool of empire.
True. However, I'm unclear as to whether or not William Henry Perkin was aware of any kind of sort of nefarious ideas behind this assignment.
I think he was just bummed he was just bummed that there was homework over spring break.
Right.
He's like, ugh.
Right, you said no homework. That's the only reason I signed up for this class.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? However, ever the dutiful student, Perkin began experimenting, and he was using a substance called aniline, which is a colorless aromatic oil derived from coal tar.
Really?
Yep. And the coal tar was basically described as...
What's the name of that?
Aniline. A-N as in Nancy, I-L-I-N-E. That's what he was using to do his experiments. Now, this was a discarded sludge from the gas lighting of the Victorian period. So lots of it laying around most households. It was a waste product. So he's going about his business. He's doing his concoctions.
Can you imagine how bad air quality was back there in London?
I mean, that's one of those, it reminds me of Latimer. It's like, hey, turn on the air conditioning. I can't breathe. Yeah, but I'm chilled. It's perfect. Yeah, but I can't breathe.
Like every single day, air quality index would have been like just horrible. Don't go outside.
So he's adding some alcohol, he's mixing things up, and he's trying to get that colorless quinine. He noticed, however, though, in his test tube after mixing it all together, that all he had was a thick black goo. And so sort of the opposite of quinine.
Yeah.
So he's pretty bummed. He's like, whoa, this backfired. So he's trying to wash it off. And as he's washing it off, he notices that the residual effect of this black goo leaves a very vivid purple color. Okay.
Really?
And yes.
On his skin? Or on the equipment.
I love the way that you're introducing these concepts because it started out on his skin and then he noticed that it transferred to a cloth. And when it transferred to the cloth, it had this untarnished brilliance in color.
What?
Okay? Yeah. So he's looking at this purple color on the cloth and he realizes that he did not synthesize quinine.
Yeah, he's going to get an F.
He's not going to do well in this course.
Plus, his parents are pissed because he's ruined the tablecloth.
Black goo all over the place. But he did inadvertently invent the very first synthetic organic chemical dye.
No.
Trying to do the quinine ends up with the first synthetic organic chemical dye. They describe it at the time as one of the most astonishing examples of serendipity in science. And I'm going to explain why. He's sitting there with this purple dye. Now, until that point,
he's like, this is a disaster. I cannot get this out of this fabric.
Purple is so not my color. Like,
first of all, it's not my color, although, you know, Britain is the land of monarchy. So, you know, maybe they can get a contract with the royal family.
Yes.
But still, it's like, you know, he's probably thinking like, oh God, like this is not at all what the assignment was.
Correct. Now, at that time, there were only natural dyes. And you referenced the royal. So the natural dyes have a very rich and long and, dare I say, colorful history.
I was going to say India, Armenia, places like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these natural dyes obviously derive from plants and animals. And the extraction process.
What are they using the animals for?
I'm going to tell you. So the extraction process for creating these natural dyes was very painstaking and laborious. So it was very rare for sort of the average person to be able to get their hands on some of these colored objects. In the case of purple in particular, the way in which purple was created, and you referenced the royals, and partly it was because of how rare it was. The reason being, it had to be extracted from a type of shellfish that only grew in select places in the Mediterranean.
Get out of town.
I'm not making
That's where purple came from?
That's where the natural dye. Yeah.
It came from shellfish?
Yeah.
Get out of town. I don't believe that.
I can't leave town.
Did you triple check all this?
No, I double check. So I'm going to do the other checks. I'm going to leave the rest to Charlotte. So the process was very costly. It's very messy with these shellfish. And so generally
and deadly to the shellfish.
Unfortunately, they did not survive the color. So this was all described. Speaking of books, if you're interested in reading more about this, there's a professor of business history at the University of Leeds. Her name is Regina Lee Blazick, and she wrote a book called The Color Revolution, which goes into great detail about how these dyes were created. Now, again, when you talk about purple, we'll get into a little more about how that purple was created, because as I mentioned, it was quite the process, and the number of these shells that needed to be, grabbed from nature to make the color is astounding.
Yeah, how did they even figure that out in the first place? But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hard to know. So the general problem at the time was also this limited supply of natural resources, because the European imperial powers were going around colonizing the world and plundering these natural resources. Right. And they did so because there was a huge appetite in Europe for these colored fabrics among, the wealthy, particularly the color purple. But colors in general back then were a little bit of a sign of wealth, so it was like, hey, is that Gucci? No, it's purple. So it has the same type of thing going on where people have it as a status.
Yeah. It's amazing to put yourself back in that time, because we're just so used to the idea of everything being available now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Color. It's like, I can order a tapestry tomorrow on Amazon or whatever. But back then it was like, oh my God, look at that tapestry.
Like, you have color. Like, that's really cool. I don't know if I would have cared that much. Like, I like just the monochromatic clothing line idea, like where you don't have to consider what matches with things. No, another invention. I wonder who invented patterns. I wonder if that would be a good episode.
You're supposed to keep that to yourself, by the way.
Yeah. I'm going to edit that out.
I'm surprised when we get into it.
No, that's true. So the natural dyes, a couple issues with the natural dyes. One being, again, the owner's process in which they're, created, which described, and natural resource issues. The other thing is that they just didn't last very long. So they faded very quickly, these natural dyes. In fact, they describe it as like once you washed the clothing, again, they didn't have Tide for colors. I think it was primarily just like banging a shirt against the rocks. Yeah. And so you literally were pounding the color out of the clothing.
But I imagine with some of those royal vestments, it's not like they're getting washed all the time. You know what I mean? Like, they're probably kind of smelly old things that are just really heavy, and, that's just part of the deal.
And they probably have backups, right? Like, that starts to fade, you bring out another one. But the sun was also, a factor because the sun faded the colors. So
yeah, but
again,
England, it's not like you're in Barbados, you're in England.
No.
Like that,
Yeah, you definitely are in England.
You're in a drafty castle. So it's
Right.
like, okay, the purple's going to stay for a while.
It will. Yeah, it's dark and damp. So for a layperson, though, obviously, colored fabrics, not so much happening. It sort of reminds me of that Henry Ford thing. Like a customer can have a car painted in any color as long as it's black. You sort of like, you don't have many choices in your wardrobe. But again, you're never going to have your socks don't match your shirt.
That's another one. Like, who was the very first person who was like, you know what, this is silly. Why are all the cars black?
Right.
Like, wait, like I'm just going to paint mine, red.
It wasn't just the cost of making this purple color from the natural dyes that is important to note. It's also, as you referenced in relation to the royals, the significance of purple. Right.
Yeah.
He didn't just create some shade of brown where it's like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. That's dog poop brown.
That's dog poop brown. So it's very fortuitous that the color that he happened upon was purple. And so let's quick aside
did he instantly say like, oh, whoa, that's kind of cool?
Well, he did understand the significance of purple, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Quickly related to purple. So
do you think this professor, like, he gives the assignment and then part of the deal is like, okay, whenever they come up with something, he owns half the patent?
Wow. Amazing that you bring that up because I actually did look into that. I was like, well, wait a second. If he was doing this as a school assignment.
Yeah.
No, what he ended up doing when he first realized that something else was going on, he started doing his tests in a different part of his house or something that wasn't where he was doing his schoolwork. And so he claimed that what he was creating had nothing to do with the assignment on quinine.
So
but that did come up.
Yeah, but clearly it did. That's what it originated from.
Right. Now we know that. But back then they're probably
but at the time, he's like, I'm not letting Professor Hoffman horn in on the big money here.
No, but Hoffman actually did ultimately try to get in on it. Well, just on his own, not even like trying to horn in on William, but just doing his own dye activity.
Yeah.
But so a brief history of purple, which I found to be interesting. I was like, why is so random? And I looked it up, and according to the New Testament, Jesus Christ, you might be familiar with him, in the hours leading up to his crucifixion was apparently dressed in purple.
As sort of like a whatchamacallit, like as sort of teasing him or mocking him or something?
That's exactly right. The Romans were mocking him because he claimed to be king of the Jews.
Yeah.
So they're like, all right, king, let's put on your purple.
King. Throw on some purple. I wonder how they were making the purple back then. Was it from the shellfish over there in the Mediterranean?
Yeah. Huh. And in fact, I'm going to give you another little tidbit about that. Alexander the Great, who seems to make an appearance in almost every episode of any season of our pods.
Yeah, someday I want to go through the list of like which people popped up the most in our across multiple but anyway, Alexander.
Yeah, you just asked Charlotte. Yeah, just ping Charlotte. She'll know. But Alexander the Great, when he was giving imperial audiences, wore purple. Here again, another time, the kings of Ptolemaic Egypt all wore what was called Tyrian purple.
Very cool. That goes back to your episode on Cleopatra. Exactly. Where you explained to us about Ptolemy and all the different ones.
Yeah, lots of Ptolemies back then.
Yeah.
Now, as early as the 15th century,
and they were wearing purple, huh?
Yeah, all wearing purple.
Purple. Yeah.
It was this Tyrian purple, they called it.
Okay, I wonder what. Now, as early is that like a? Okay, I'll look it up.
It's a deep shade of purple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
but in Egypt, you do have the sun damage issue because like that is,
Unless you're just hanging out, in the pyramids, it's probably dark because I don't ever see any windows on the pyramids, so that it must have been dark in there.
Yeah, design flaw, or was that just part of it?
Interesting question.
Windows.
Yeah, so as early as the 15th century BC, two cities on the coast of ancient Phoenicia, which is now Lebanon, a city called Sidon and Tyre, were producing purple dye. That's where a lot of this was coming from. And again, they were getting it from a snail. And the dye was actually mentioned both in the Iliad of Homer and the Aeneid. Yes, and the Aeneid. And this deep, rich purple dye from the snail, the reason it became known as Tyrian was because of that region in Tyre. So it was like,
right.
tier.
There's something about there's some theory that, like, I forget how it goes, but it's something to the effect of, like, when you don't have the word for the color, you don't see the color. And they look back at I forget whether it's the Iliad or the Odyssey, and they point out, like, there's just, you don't see a mention of the blue sky or the whatever else, a green or whatever, because, and they're saying, like, those, I don't know what it's worth looking into, but the point is that like, they don't have the word for it yet, and they're not anyway, I thought of it because you mentioned which one, the Iliad.
Yeah.
The other thing that's just coming to mind is has to do with India. Like, I associate them with, did they have some way to make purple over there? Like,
yeah, I mean, there were places in which purple was being produced, but again, from these natural dyes, it still involved using these various animals.
So that was like the expensive, like, that's the, okay,
super expensive. Rare. You asked about the number of snails. So thousands of tiny snails had to be found. Then they had to crack their shells, remove the snail, and they have found mountains of empty shells in these ancient sites of Sidon and Tyre, where they were producing this color. Yeah. So these snails, they had to be soaked for a long time. Then their tiny glands had to be removed and the juice extracted.
Lord.
I mean, it was a whole process. It took a long time.
It doesn't sound cozy for the snail. Do they also eat the snail, by the way, or am I getting off track?
You're definitely off track. Like, I didn't look into that. That'll be on Killer Restaurants. We'll get into that. But a very onerous process to produce this. So that they would get this dark purple dye, and then they would use it to dye the wool or the linen and silk. It was a very bright color, but created at great expense.
I bet Cleopatra was arrayed in some of that when she was presenting herself to Mark Antony or to Julius Caesar.
Definitely some purple.
Hitting the purple hard. Yeah.
No doubt. Coincidentally, a German chemist named Paul Friedander tried to recreate this Tyrian purple in 2008. And check this out. He took 12,000 mollusks, and he was able, from those 12,000 mollusks, to create 1.4 ounces of the dye, which was just enough to color a handkerchief. So, I mean, can you imagine?
I know, those poor 12,000 mollusks, just for like a tiny amount of purple dye.
Amount. Now, that tiny amount, a gram of Tyrian purple, that was made from 10,000 mollusks, according to the original formula, would cost about 2,000 euros in the year 2000. So super expensive.
Well, and way back when, I mean, adjusting for all the inflation and everything, but way back then, I would assume that would also be a way to get rich. Like, if you were good at that process, and you had a team of people that would gather up, you could become a pretty wealthy dye maker, dye seller.
Yeah, that could be. I wonder if there was like a big business around that. That's interesting.
Got to be. I mean, like with the Armenian carpets, with the Persian rugs and all that,
beautiful rugs,
incredible colors, and they were working with dyes way back when. But they must have all been, from
natural dyes,
from organic, natural dyes.
Yeah.
But,
so even.
Great sophistication about working with different colors and stuff.
Incredible. Yeah, so those are incredible. So during the 60s and 70s in the US, the counterculture psychedelics, again another tie-in, and musicians like Jimi Hendrix with his song Purple Haze were all sort of centered on the color purple.
Good point.
You had that English rock band Deep Purple. Okay, formed in 1968.
So I wonder what the association is there, because, like, of course, the thing that popped into my mind was monarchy. But you're right, in the in the psychedelic age, purple was a big thing.
Yeah, I think it just took on this sort of aura of, like, it started off being incredibly difficult to get and very expensive, so it had all those connotations of wealth and whatever, and then it just sort of morphed from there to become this coveted color. Even Prince, Purple Rain, so purple just keeps coming up. Let's just leave it at that. So let's go back to the mid 1800s. And again,
let's go back.
At that time, purple just happened to be the most coveted color in all of Europe. Okay. Various shades of purple, pink, lilac, mauve, rose. That was the height of fashion in the spring of 50s.
And an 18-year-old accidentally makes it on spring break.
You can't make this up.
Yeah.
So pretty incredible timing.
Wow.
Now,
And it
here's
was
where
only when he washed off the black goo that
yes,
the purple was left behind. Okay.
revealed itself. Yeah, yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, just unbelievable. So Perkin was not an idiot. He realized very quickly that he was onto something, given the color. And so he filed a patent in August of 1856.
Oh, that year, as an 18-year-old, he does
I
it
think it was that
immediately.
day. I think he was
Yeah.
like, Jesus, this is purple? Are you kidding me? I made it out of
Yeah.
this sludge.
We probably didn't even have to fill out all the paperwork. It's just like stain the piece of paper with the purple. It's like, dude, I know how to make this. Hit me up.
Yeah, you don't need Latimer. Like you just, go ahead and just send in a swatch.
Right.
Here's the invention or whatever. Good luck, doing that without all the snails.
Good use of swatch, by the way. Okay, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Yeah, I actually, that just popped out and I was very pleased with that. So now he files this patent and and with the filing of the patent, they say, boom, a new industry was born.
No.
That's because of this dye.
But it's just purple. It's not like he's figured out some way to make all the other colors yet.
Not yet. And that's another
Okay.
good, preview of what's coming. But he does call this purple, originally he calls it Tyrian purple, so that he felt it could have more value because that's the association with Tyrian is where the value is. And again, he could not have chosen a better time or place for his discovery.
Yeah.
England at the time, cradle of the Industrial Revolution, right?
Mhm.
Largely driven by advances in the production of textiles. So I think
boy.
textiles, now you got to have the color. So the science of chemistry had advanced to a point where it could actually impact these industrial processes. And you have coal tar, which was the major source of this raw material that he was using, from the waste products, in abundant supply for making this.
Amazing. Now, hold on. So first he calls it Tyrian purple.
He calls it Tyrian purple when he files the patent. And again, everything is basically in place for him to just exploit this discovery. He's all ready to go with this Tyrian purple. And again, he's 18.
Notice he didn't call it Perkin purple, which,
some people did actually call it Perkin purple. But before we get into what happened after he files the patent and essentially starts this new industry, we need to hear from our new sponsor, which I don't know if you heard in the open, is also quite appropriate for this episode.
Good point.
Thank you.
We're really chemistry heavy kicking off the inventions season. This is great. I was not a strong chemistry student. I don't know about you.
I don't want to boast, but I was a very strong chemistry student.
Really? That sounded like boasting.
I know it does when I say it that way. When I say I was top of my class in chemistry and helped everybody, don't want to brag, but wow, I was really good at chemistry. In fact, my chemistry teacher, asked me if I would be continuing my studies in college of chemistry.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No science teacher ever inquired of that to me. They were like, they said, it'd probably be better if you call it a day after this course.
Have you considered an alternative to science kit? Perhaps you're a man of letters. Okay, so now before we continue, let's hear from our new sponsor, and then I'm going to tell you what happens to the good William Perkin on the other side.
Perfect. During the COVID pandemic, we all saw the effects of global supply chain disruptions. One company stood out for its continued performance and supply, Jade Petrochemicals. With offices in Long Beach and Bahrain, with hiring preferences for military veterans, Jade Petrochemicals sets the global standard for safe storage and shipping of vital petrochemicals.
Yeah, Jade Petrochemicals.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, super exciting.
And we're excited to be in partnership. Now, I have a question for you.
Probably won't be able to answer, but let me see.
Yeah, that's the best kind of question, because then you're flummoxed, and then hilarity ensues. No,
for sure.
I would imagine there would be some people that might be bummed about affordable, prevalent purple. Like, wouldn't the monarchy be like, hold on? Like, that's our
I think it
color.
was just colorblind people were upset because they felt like someone else had an advantage over them.
Well, but I thought colorblind people, it's trouble with green and red, isn't it?
Well, red green is one type of color blindness
man,
which I do have. Yeah,
you have a tremendous amount of useless knowledge stored in your head.
I do. It's really frustrating. I feel like it takes up too much space. You know how you clear out your hard drive? Sometimes I feel like, can I clear out all this extraneous information? Because I hate when I just come up with random facts that I do not need to know.
I was watching a hockey game the other day, and I had to
No
watch
way. You were watching hockey? You gotta be kidding me.
I had to watch the opponent's feed because it was against a local team here in California. I hate that. Okay, but the opponent's broadcast team was like, hey, by the way, Washington Capitol forward Anthony Mantha, colorblind. And I was like, first of all, how did I not know that? Second of all, what relevance does it have? Third, why did I have to wait and find out about it from like the opponent's broadcast team? Like,
but you should have had the second question first and just stopped there. With what relevance? 0. So now I don't have to consider this anymore.
You can edit all of this out. Okay, but anyway, so the monarchy, there's no evidence they tried to crack down on the.
No, not again, limited research here.
Because it's like, if purple is part of what was so special about it was that it was so rare. But so suddenly if everybody can have it.
Yeah, and I think I read something around like the Pope, and they were wearing purple, but then something changed and they switched to red. So I'm not sure like what was going on there.
Did you see that the Pope just kicked that guy out of his house at the Vatican? Are you up on that?
And now he's evicting people? You think he'd have people to do that for him?
Yeah.
He shows up.
Yeah, in the cape and everything. No, this was like some American cardinal or something who was he was one of the traditionalists. He was bummed about the new Pope being friendly toward the gays and all that stuff. And so he's just always harping away at this Pope. And finally the Pope was like, you know what, dude? Like, you've been living rent free here at the Vatican.
More free lunch.
Yeah. Go find lodging somewhere else. Start paying rent.
Yeah. You don't like my ideas? You don't like my house. So get out of here.
Perfect.
Okay, so now that's a good segue into what Mr. Perkin was up to after his invention.
Counting the money, I'm guessing.
You're not far off. So again, he originally has this purple, this Tyrian purple, as it was known in the ancient world. So then he decides to change the name to a more fashionable French word, mauve. And
whoa. So that's the shade we're talking about?
That is the shade we're talking about. And the color mauve was all the rage in the mid-1850s. So Lee Blazek, who wrote the book I mentioned, The Color Revolution, she says, quote, the color mauve was all the rage in the mid-1850s as ladies of fashion adopted the new hues to come from the French and Swiss textile mills.
Now, wait, this is the lady in Leeds? This is the lady that wrote the book?
Professor in Leeds. Yep, The Color Revolution.
Yeah, like, for instance, calling it like Leeds purple, like, that wouldn't have been good. But if you put a French, you put a French word on there, then it makes it fashionable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when he went to start to commercialize this dye, this color, he changed it a little bit and called it Mauvienne. So he took mauve and then he created Mauvienne.
Yeah, I think that is, now we're gilding the lily a little bit. Like, just call it mauve. And I've never even known how to pronounce that color. So
I checked a couple sources. I went with mauve. I could be off.
Yeah, I'm okay. Mauvienne, like IAN at the end. Mauvienne.
Yeah, it was actually E-N-E, but it's
like the French. Mauvienne. Okay.
Mauvienne. Yes.
Yeah,
great pronunciation.
Thank you very much. That was one of the teachers that said maybe you should keep studying this one. Really? She said I had a good ear.
Yeah, good accent. And mauve was associated with, Parisian haute couture, as they say. So he was trying to, again, very sharp for an 18-year-old to not only capitalize on the dye, but to know how to name it.
Yeah.
This guy's 18.
Do we know anything about his parents? Were his parents like rich, fancy, connected people? Like, he seems like a very sophisticated 18-year-old. If he's like, okay, well, we got to make it French, then it'll sell.
Again, outside the scope of...
Yeah.
This episode is his parents. Maybe if this was Killer Biographies, I would have gone into his family. But I'm keeping this real.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
So this in August of 18 1859, in the newspaper, there was an article where it said London had succumbed to what is known as the mauve measles. Everyone just wanted this mauve color.
Amazing.
And he just invented it, essentially. In fact, there's a great photo online of they still have the little glass vial and stopper with the label Mauvien, the first one. The very first one that he created.
Oh, man.
Which is very cool. And so at the time, there was a lot of celebration around his discovery. And later on, someone wrote, the chemist C.J.T. Cronshaw told a gathering of the Society of Chemical Industry, if a fairy godmother had given Perkin the chance of choosing the precise moment for his discovery, he could not have selected a more appropriate or more auspicious time. I mean,
yeah, because of what you said. Yeah, because of what you said, the Industrial Revolution. They're starting to crank out the textiles.
And everyone wants that color. Like, he happened to discover that color first, like, that's crazy.
That feels like it was meant to be.
Yeah, and it keeps building on it, because Queen Victoria was wearing this Mauvien color. So that got more people, demanding this color. Empress Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III in France.
Sure. Yeah.
Big fan of the mauve.
Loved the mauve, huh?
She was all about the mauve. And then with the, production of the different textiles, and the hooped skirt required a large quantity of cloth. So all this came together and became sort of the perfect storm for Perkin.
What a bizarre fashion innovation or technology that was. The hooped skirt. What the hell?
The hooped skirt. Yeah. But that could be another invention we cover. That might be a short episode. But in 1857, in May, one of his business associates in the textile industry wrote to him with congratulations that, quote, a rage for your color has set in among that all-powerful class of the community, the ladies. So very popular with all of the dresses. And again, you had Empress Eugenie, you had all these people in highfalutin roles, showcasing this color.
Wow.
Okay.
So all of a sudden it was the mauve revolution in London in the late 1950s. Huh.
Yeah. And in France, right? Because you had
walking around Paris or London and you're like, yeah, I did that. I'm 19 now and I did that.
No one would believe you. And it was also the very first time that sort of normal people like school teachers could afford to buy these fabrics in these beautiful bright colors.
I mean, I wouldn't just classify all school teachers as normal people, but
not all. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that a declarative. But what I will say is that, again, when you look at the serendipity, the Singer sewing machine had just started being imported from America. So you have these people making their own clothes, but now able to, use these colored fabrics.
Unbelievable.
And they won't fade or, when you wash them or dry them in the sun.
You know who's the second happiest about this beside Perkin?
Who?
The snails.
Oh my gosh, you are so right. Although I did also read that among the very wealthy and potentially the royals, although I can't confirm that, they preferred the natural dye. Because that was what was still separating them from the mass.
It was like a status symbol. I wonder if you could tell, honestly, if you had two fabrics and you put the two dyes next to each other, if you could really tell. Yeah,
I don't know. That's a great question. The color, which, you'll see online, is phenomenal. Like, it is an incredible shade of purple. Not usually that impressed with purple, but that it looks really great. Again, you have the Mauvien, and he went on to then discover some other colors. So he kept now producing colors. Factories started popping up across Europe producing these dyes. His professor, as I mentioned, took the bait. Like, he started trying to create dyes as well.
That's not taking the bait. Like I said, that's horning in. I mean, it's like the student came up with it, dude.
Right. Okay. But he didn't sue him. He just, he at first actually was very critical. You mentioned the bad grade. He was very critical that Perkin abandoned the quinine research and pursued this commercial manufacture of artificial dyes. But then later he synthesized his own dye called rosanullion, or whatever. So, he's trying to get in on the party.
He gave him a gentleman's C. He's like, exactly. Didn't stick with it long enough.
All right. So now Perkins, as I mentioned, he created something that was entirely new, incredibly desirable, but had done it through chemistry. And at the
Yeah.
time, chemistry was not seen as a money-making endeavor. And there's a plaque outside of his London home today that says he, quote, founded science-based industry. So again, the repercussions of this invention was not just that he came up with purple, but created an industry, and then it just manifested into all these other things, which I'll talk about.
Yeah, maybe chemistry was more, for medicine or research or whatever. But so the idea of like consumer products coming out of it was still new.
Still new. Now, the mauve mania didn't last forever. By 1870, other colors came in vogue. So it wasn't all this mauvienne. But the effects of his discovery were everlasting. And Lee Blazek in The Color Revolution writes, quote, by laying the foundation for the synthetic organic chemicals industry, Perkin helped to revolutionize the world of fashion. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing, just to tie back to last week's episode when we were talking about psychedelics, how they've been used for thousands of years, that was, I forget where I heard this, but they mentioned that part of what was so stunning to people in these ancient colors about psychedelics is that they were having visions of these incredible colors, which were sort of rare in the natural world. Like, natural world is a little more drab.
Interesting. So your brain created these colors.
Yeah, these really intense colors and like visions of like incredible jewels and sort of heavenly landscapes and stuff like that. But part of what made the vision so stunning to people is that, these dyes hadn't been invented or popularized or whatever. So like in the natural world, they weren't seeing such intense hues,
Right. But interesting that you can see these vivid colors in your mind's eye, but they don't exist in reality. Like that. Yeah. That is interesting.
What about So not to be too materialistic about this, but does he get just obscenely wealthy?
He does. So he's very young and very rich. And while he was sort of perfecting his technology, he created other colors. So his business was huge. And again, he basically inaugurated this new branch of chemistry, which would have, again, a huge impact in numerous fields. So again, going back to Lee, and you can see which book I leaned on here, but in The Color Revolution, she says, quote, that industry not only brought new paints, pigments, and dyes into the world, but it was ultimately responsible for major innovations such as synthetic rubber, fibers such as nylon and polyester, and miracle drugs such as penicillin. So again, it's just this idea that chemistry could generate industry.
Generate industry and generate billions in profits. So
huge. And again, like no one ever considered like some simple experiment in this 18-year-old's house would be a catalyst for this entirely new way that science and industry work together. I mean, it really was like a huge deal back then.
Yeah, this was the perfect sponsor to have today, petrochemicals.
Yeah, unbelievable. And she also compares him, frankly, to Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Bezos. She says, quote, all these entrepreneurs stumbled across an idea when they were young and unrestrained by the traditions that held back their elders and were able to create something brand new and revolutionary. I mean, that's heady company, right? Like, that's incredible. 18 years old.
Incredible.
Another tie-in. So he ends up dying in 1907.
Okay,
again, a very wealthy man.
Let me do the math here.
Yeah,
so
actually, that'd be good if you could do that math.
70. Was he just 69?
Yeah, he wasn't very old.
Oh.
Yeah, no, he had pneumonia, but he had a burst appendix, which complicated a lot of things. He did have several children. He had 4 sons, all became chemists.
Really?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Which is interesting. So many honors in his lifetime. He was actually knighted.
One of them is he was knighted. Yeah, you said he was
knighted. Sir, in 1906, he was knighted. In the same year, he was awarded the very first Perkin Medal, appropriately named, and it was established to commemorate the 50th anniversary of his discovery of mauvienne. Today, the Perkin Medal is widely acknowledged as the highest honor in U.S. industrial chemistry. It's been awarded annually by the American section of the Society of Chemical Industry, of which he was actually president. He was president of the Society of Chemical Industry from 1884 to 85.
Unbelievable. So he really was a giant in chemistry. The Perkin Medal.
The Perkin Medal. And then on top of that,
do you feel like you could have been a candidate, if things had broke a different way for a Perkin Medal at one point?
I do often reflect on the flubber that I created. And I realized no. Like, I don't think I actually had any innate ability in chemistry. I think I probably just studied a
Your
little bit
teacher
harder.
disagreed. Your
Yeah, he
teacher
really did, Mr.
disagreed.
Marsh. He really
Yeah.
thought I had a future in chemistry. Now on March 12th, 2018, not that
Okay.
long ago,
Right.
Google, they had what they call a Google Doodle to mark Perkins' 180th birthday.
Okay, so Google does their Google Doodle, and what is it?
It's like a purple scripted thing, tribute to Perkins, to
Nice.
Perkin, to his
Nice.
180th birthday. So a lot of people must have known about this guy.
When he got knighted, do you think the
Was he wearing
monarch
purple?
was no? Do you think the monarch was like, yeah, but we're wearing the real shit here, dude.
Right.
We're still using the snail stuff.
Yeah, a lot of snails went into
good
this.
Good job.
fabric.
You can be a sir, but like, this
Right.
is what the real purple looks like.
You want to see vibrant purple? Okay, you're gonna have to butcher some snails.
You want to see vibrant purple? That's fine, but just step away from the window because it's very susceptible to sun damage. So
Exactly.
come over here and look at my robe.
Wait, why is it gray? Oh, you walked here. It's sunny out. You can't do that. Oh man. I just think it's insane that he was so young, that he was on vacation, that he's doing homework, and he's trying to synthesize this quinine for his motherland so they could continue to conquer, lands far away.
Incredible tale. And as for continuity, it reminds me a little bit of Albert Hoffman with LSD, where it's like that's not really what he was trying to do.
Right.
He was trying to come up with something for childbirth or some kind of medicine. And then he's like, oh, what the hell is this stuff? What? Same thing here. It's like he's working away from trying to make some synthetic quinine, and it's like, oh, how about make $1 billion instead by coming?
Yeah, I wonder if like he had other homework on vacation. And he was like, you know what? I'm not even going to do it because I just invented purple.
Plus,
so I'm going to leave that other
spring
homework
break. It's England. Do you think he was half
Easter,
in the bag while he was doing this work? He was just like hammered?
I don't know what's the drinking age back then. Like, he was only 18.
He's got a home lab. I bet he's got like a distillery.
He's mixing things up.
He's mixing things up. He's like, the mom comes in. She's like, oh my God, you stained the napkins. Like, what?
Right. His dad probably in there like, wait, did you just say you created mead? I'm thirsty. No, I said mauve. Like, what? What are you doing in there? What's with the sludge? And why'd you ruin mom's carpet?
I wonder during the mauve measles, the mauve revolution, I wonder if men were also getting into it, wearing some purple suits and stuff, or is mainly more the female fashion?
Yeah, only what I read was really rooted in the various female garments. All the dresses and the hats and the trimmings, everything was in support of what the ladies, as they said, were interested in
It's
wearing.
interesting how there's connotations to color. It's like we said, purple, monarchy, but then also like creativity, maybe, with Jimi Hendrix and the hippies and all that. Maybe it's that
Alexander the Great's wearing the purple.
Yeah.
It's like,
that gets to the monarchy. I mean, that gets to the rulers. But then there's also the creativity. Whereas like with red, there are connotations to that, like, seeing red, or like the bull and the matador, or the sports car. Like there's just different. Anyway, do we know what other colors he came up with? Any good ones?
I didn't see anything that jumped out at me.
It's hard to top mauve.
It's hard to top mauve. I did, obviously read way too much about the way in which other colors were derived, like indigo. That came from the Indigofera tinctoria, made, the indigo dye from the leaves of this plant.
Yeah. Indigo, but is indigo like deep blue? What is indigo?
Yeah, that's like a deep blue.
That's cool.
But you had these insects that were very sought after because you could create like this scarlet dye called carmine. You'd find these weird things, like you kill a bug and you're like, oh, it's red. Maybe I can, wear a shirt.
The other cool thing is it's not just the color. That they've got like the blues and the purples or whatever, but they also had a lot of gold in Africa. And so they probably had like gold thread and gold, they had garments that had gold in them as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you see some of the like hats back then and things like where they were using dye very judiciously, so that it would be just on the trim or as a decorative item, not like a whole dress that's purple.
Yeah,
you saw
it kind of makes you feel like consumer culture and modern technology has sort of ruined it a little bit, like because everything is just so widely available and so easy. It's like, okay,
but you still have designer labels. People are still finding a way to essentially boast about their place in society based on what they wear. Right. So it's the same idea.
And it's weird how certain, like, why Burberry, like why that particular pattern suddenly like caught fire and became a status symbol. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like inventions of patterns like that. I wonder about that. Like when was someone like, why isn't this shirt, with a pattern? Like you should put a pattern on that shirt. Like, well, I don't know. I still just want a blue color.
And then like some of them stand the test of time. And then there's other things like the hoop skirts where you just look back and you're like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Who would ever think that the woman became more attractive because she had these huge metal hoops underneath her?
Well, and talk about like the amount of effort to produce a hooped skirt. Like, is it really worth it? Like that just seems silly.
Yeah, it sets off the metal detectors. Just to proactively kind of anticipate a complaint from Lizzie. Not that a woman's attractiveness is the prime criteria or goal of fashion.
No.
So I just want fashion also is an expression of self. I've been taught this by my daughter.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it doesn't depend on the gaze of the man or whatever.
Correct.
Okay, so do you think I'm out of the woods there?
Maybe. I'm a little nervous, but I was quoting when I said the ladies, like someone made a reference that your color is the rage with all the important people, meaning the ladies. That's a quote. I didn't make that up, so I don't want to hear from you.
That's also a good clarification. Okay, good.
Yeah. So anyways, that's this week's invention, the invention of dye. It's really interesting.
That's an amazing story. Great episode. Do we have to stick with chemistry because I'm going to tease next episode?
Yeah, I was going to say, are you teasing?
I'm teasing. Okay. And it's not chemistry.
Okay.
And it's something that has a connection to your family. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, now I'm nervous.
Yeah, no, don't be nervous. It's nothing that will won't reveal any personal details or anything like that, and it won't reflect badly on the Geller clan.
Excellent.
Overall, I'm just saying you have a personal connection to this.
Excellent. Okay.
But in a sense, we all do. Okay, Sir William Henry Perkin.
The inventor of the synthetic dye industry, really, more than just the color. So that'll do it for episode 2 of Killer Inventions, season 3 of the Killer Means Awesome podcast. We look forward to our next episode in which you will be presenting an incredibly interesting invention that somehow relates to me as well as everybody else.
Yeah, we'll see if it's incredibly interesting, but it should be passably interesting.
I'll take it. See you next time.
All right.